Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and it's time for the next in our set of season reviews, and we're going to talk about the IOL today. Joining me for that is my friend Frazer Tafar. You know him from the Matchup Show. Frazer, how you doing today?
Doing good, Ken. Glad to be back on for a good review on the offensive line, interior offensive line. Obviously, we had a disappointing end to the season, which could have been prepping for another playoff game, but here we are doing a peer review of what the Ravens inside offensive line has looked like in 2025.
Yeah, we're recording this on Thursday, and the news has just broken about John Harbaugh being signed by the Giants, and they are gleeful in their
Yeah.
acquisition of Harbaugh. I'll just say there's not any vitriol over there, so he'll have a honeymoon period certainly there, and lots to talk about over there in terms of how he'll probably change the Giants franchise.
Yep.
But let's talk about this offensive line a little bit, the interior offensive line. We talked about the offensive tackles, by the way, on a separate show. So take a look for that out there on filmstudybaltimore.com or your favorite podcast platform. But all three interior guys played 969 or more snaps from just 1,014 for the season. So there's only 45 missed snaps among these three guys. Actually, 45
Wow.
was the most snaps that anybody missed. And that was Voorhees. He
Right.
left injured in one of the
Two
games.
games. I
Two
think it
games,
was
I
two
guess.
games. Yeah.
Um, Emory Jones and Ben Cleveland were around Emory for about half the year, Ben Cleveland for the whole year, unable to crack the lineup. So discussing them is not really uh, significant here, but this is not a group that has a lot of total bodies.
Yeah, it's tough. This year has been centric around those three people. Linderbaum has obviously been the main staple. We need him at center every single week. Faalele as well. And then you mentioned the injuries to Voorhees, but it's been unfortunate that we didn't get some of these other talents a look, like Ben Cleveland, like Bullock. We give Emory Jones a couple times at rotation, and the Harbaugh's. Uh, he said he didn't perform against the Patriots, so I think was it the Patriots or the Bengals he played.
We're talking Emory Jones now.
Yeah, when he was
He played
rotating.
in a couple of different games. He had a holding penalty in one game, and he had others as well. Let me get to it 1 second. So Emory Jones played 15 snaps against Cincinnati. These are scored snaps. One against at Cincinnati, 13 versus New England at home, and 13 more at Pittsburgh in the finale. And that was split between two positions. But
Yeah,
him a little later in terms of. But you're right. I mean, if you're talking about, we really would like to know who we have with Bullock
exactly.
and Jones. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, we didn't get any insight on who they were, especially Bullock. We saw flashes of him in the preseason, having high IQ offensive line play, and he could have probably incorporated that into his pulling, second level, just figuring out how to cut off effectively. Those things you can't teach a lineman. You can teach, but it's usually instinct, knowing how to cut off people with just certain parts of your body, not having to be straight up. So there's some things I liked about Bullock, some things I like about Jones. We have our feelings about Ben Cleveland and the opportunities that we wish he had, but now he's with the Chargers on a futures deal, so that's their problem now. But go ahead.
It's interesting that the the Ravens never really gave Ben Cleveland a chance. But if you looked
Yeah,
at this year, I'm surprised they signed him at all because I think he had this substance abuse thing hanging over his head pretty much
yeah,
the whole year. It was all due to the DUI before the season. Then he finally got suspended for 3 games, and the Ravens cut him effectively at that point. In truth, they let his suspension ride for that time when he wasn't being paid, and then when he came back, they cut him from the team entirely. But I guess they felt like they couldn't rely on him. Like if they put him in as a starter at some point
yeah.
for Voorhees or Faalele, either one who there certainly were lots of advocates for that. They felt like they couldn't rely on him for the whole season, so it didn't make sense from a continuity standpoint.
And it kind of did. It did. You're right with the continuity. It's unfortunate that the final verdict with the NFL didn't come until the end of the year when he could have been playing all those weeks, all those months, and then potentially getting better as a guard. But that's not neither here or there. We did technically waste Ben Cleveland's career, and that's one of many of John Harbaugh's picks that did not come to fruition for Baltimore. So
You're talking about specifically someone he pounded the table for.
exactly
Yeah.
him, Devin Duvernay. They didn't pay, well, Devin Duvernay was all pro,
He
but
was okay. Yeah.
he didn't pan out in Baltimore. He went to different pastures. So things of that nature. I think he had some of the build that we want for offensive linemen. I think it might have been just in between the eyes was the issue, just not understanding what to do and always having. He's always had concussion issues, Ben Cleveland. He's always head first when he goes to contact. I think that's the problem that they had with him because he was always initiating contact with his head first. Um,
Hmm.
but other than that, I think this coming year we should see a lot of Emory Jones and Bullock if we do see a shakeup in the interior offensive line.
Looking at the line as a whole, they had a much less pull intensive scheme than they've had in the Roman era, but they still pull a fair amount for an NFL team. And when I say that, you're probably an average game, the guards are pulling about 4 times each. And they had towards the end of the season, they were running more counter plays again. That was something they'd kind of taken out of their game for
Mm.
some of the season. But it's definitely not a pull intensive scheme. The Roman era was all about power running and tons and tons and tons of pulls. Bradley Bozeman had, I think, 25. It might have even been 26 in one game. The previous record before for a Raven had been 19 for a lot of years. That was in Yonda, famously in the 2009 AFC wildcard game when they went up to New England and they beat the snot out of the Patriots. They ran 52 times in that game, and Yonda pulled 19 times. But the point I'm making is that the Ravens had done a really good job of making average athletes into good pullers. I've said that a lot of times on the show. Voorhees is another example of that. And he had a really good stretch of pulling at midseason. Then he had a couple of stumbles down the stretch that weren't as good. But it is an area of his game that I think that it probably meets the standard, even if you want to move up to a more pull intensive scheme.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting how the new regime approaches the run game. We've seen obviously the pulling action style we saw with Roman, a little bit more of a regression from that from Munkin, but still incorporated into the offense. I think this next regime could potentially delve deeper into the zone run scheme to start making more creative play action boots or making the offense more spacious for Lamar in terms of the run game as well. Um, I'm curious to see how we attack it moving forward. I think if we do have a change at either right or left guard, they their strengths must be getting to the second level correctly, pulling and making contact where it needs to be. Those things should be the next pillars for the guards that we're looking for if they don't return. I know Voorhees probably is going to return, but if there's competition brought in, I think that's what we're looking for.
Well, I'm with you on that in terms of the run game, no doubt about it. But to me, and this is a much undervalued pillar for all interior linemen, is they've got to be good pass blockers. They got to
Yes.
be good pass blockers first and good run blockers second, to put it very clearly. And I
Yep.
think of it the same way I've said on this show a number of times. They got to be good on base percentage players first, which is pass blocking,
Yeah.
and good
Yeah.
sluggers second, which is run blocking. And
It
that's
used to be the other way around before in NFL. You should be run block first, then pass, but now it's completely changed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely the more important side of what people do, and it's still something that in some scoring systems in PFF, notably, it doesn't really isn't really reflected properly. But we'll talk about that, I'm sure, later. The run game still remains at the DNA with the Ravens. I think that will remain a core tenet. But the more I think about it, is who the hell is going to be left to
Yeah.
maintain the DNA of this team? I mean, there better be a laboratory somewhere in that castle where they can go and say, "Oh yeah, that's what we did," kind of thing. That's where we successful. And then, they do have all of obviously the film and whatnot. But I mean, already we're talking about Harbaugh taking a lot of people with him. We're
Yeah.
talking about a
Munkin is gone.
complete rebuild of the coaching staff.
Yeah. And I think I was thinking about this, especially when there was about a bunch of talk about AJ Brown to the Ravens after he had that dismal playoff performance.
Mhm.
it makes me think, why would the Ravens want to double down on this run centric culture when they have issues bringing in top talent wide receivers? If that is something they want to continue to move forward with Lamar, I know he wants to work with high end receivers and uh, not make flowers out of mud with a bunch of go ahead.
Well, what I'll say about that is that sounded like a BS rhetorical question, and I've gotten in my careers in actuary, I got a huge number of BS rhetorical questions. Still trying to maintain our G rating here, our PG rating, from marketers. That is the primary adversary often in terms of thoughts about how the company ought to be run.
Mhm.
Is marketing and actuary are marketing and actuarial are often at odds, and as an actuary, I can tell you, I get these BS rhetorical questions. Again, I'll give you the actual answer for this. The Ravens probably have decided it's the correct organizational strategy to not pay the kind of prices which are currently in place for wide receivers. And they've drafted them in recent years and had some success doing it with both Brown and they've had some success with Bateman. I think we'd agree he wasn't worth the first round pick, but he's not been a terrible receiver when he's
Yeah.
been healthy. And they certainly had a lot of success with Flowers in terms of the value of that selection late in the first round. And the Ravens have basically, I think, said, we're not going to be able to go to the market and pay for wide receivers.
Yeah.
So and the other thing is, you're absolutely right that Lamar Jackson um, he might want more wide receivers, but that doesn't mean wide receivers want to play with him. If they want fantasy stats,
They don't want to play with
they
Lamar
need
for
to go
sure.
somewhere else because
Yeah.
the offense runs through Lamar Jackson and it's
Well,
based entirely on
I think that's
what
the
options he has.
problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem because you're saying that they can't get their numbers in Baltimore. Why can't they? I guess why don't we take that approach with this new offensive minded, if we go that way, this new offensive quarter or this new offensive minded head coach? I guess
Well,
that's where I'm at.
and I guess the answer I would say is I think because the Ravens believe in his organization, it's a
Yeah.
suboptimal way to use the cap. So
Fair.
they're limited in terms of the cap. They're limited in terms of draft capital. They've got to do the best they can with limited resources in both areas. And
Mhm.
so they're saying, I can't make as good a football team, particularly with Lamar Jackson at quarterback, if I'm forced to go out and play market wide receiver prices.
Fair.
And
That's
that
fair.
may even be part of the decision on whether or not they continue with Zay Flowers, or as opposed to going out and drafting another wide receiver in one of the next two seasons.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what they do with Zay. I mean, personally, if he's asking for top of the line wide receiver money, I think he's going to walk because we
Mhm.
can just that's not our mo. So it'll be interesting what we do with Zay. Do you think we use the 5th year option on him because that's
Yes.
expensive too?
Yeah, it is expensive, and it just went up by about 4 million or three
God,
point something million from him making another Pro Bowl. But yeah,
well,
it's
good thing we're saving on Harbaugh's contract now. That's a good thing.
that's not cap dollars. Look, Bishotti can spend as many dollars out of his own wallet as he wants. He's spending my money when he's spending the cap money.
Mhm.
That's the way I look at it.
Fair,
So
fair,
uh,
fair.
uh, he's he even made a point during the press conference about he he was encouraging Harbaugh to take a year off from
Yeah,
football because at age 63, the vacations he can take and the things he can do are much more significant than what he can do at 75. And he by the
right.
way, he's 100% right. And Maureen and I are going through that same thought process in terms of figuring out what vacations we want to take when. Physically we won't be the same in 10 years, and we know it. So anyway, we're I get it totally, but what Bishotti said beyond that was that he was more than happy because the offset language, he would get some money back if he signed with the
Yeah,
Giants. So,
yeah.
but but he would be more than happy to give him an expensive paid vacation for the next year. And it just tells you the money that Bishotti spends, and applies to all assistant coach money,
Mhm.
all coaching salaries. That's outside the cap, and it's where the Ravens can derive a very significant advantage if they just want to.
Right. And I think to your point about what Bishotti said, I never have I heard an employer say that to an employee. I'm willing to pay you an expensive
Yeah,
vacation. That just tells you about what kind of man Bishotti is and who really owns this organization. I mean,
right.
kind of gave me goosebumps hearing that because wow. I mean, you don't.
Listen,
That's not normal.
Yeah, you're right. It's not normal, and it's born of an 18-year relationship with this
Yeah.
guy. And I'm glad he spoke out about the vitriol that was out there about Harbaugh as well. It's completely unfair from
Yeah.
the fan base that just I they
It's
just cannot
nonstop.
recognize any positive in a man
Yeah.
who's been around this long. And they have to over magnify every negative. It's absurd. It's just
I'll
absurd.
tell you, I'm grateful for John Harbaugh because his leadership, his vision, it, implanted on me as I was growing up watching this team for 18 years. So in that respect, all my kudos to John Harbaugh. He's given me some kind of courage, confidence that, you get from someone that you watch who's been going through the mud for 18 years, has been a champion, has been to the bottom, has been back to the top. I mean, his career has been admirable, to say the least.
It's 9 years since the Ravens last played a game where they didn't have a chance to win the Super Bowl. Not
Yeah.
since the 2016 season finale.
And I was a freshman in high school at that time. I mean, a freshman in college, sorry. So that's a while ago.
All right, Andrew Vorhees. Let's talk a little bit about him. He did not play well in his first full year. Of course, he had about 5 games the previous year where he played some of the beginning, some of the end. Lost his job in the middle to McCary, and then in his first full year, he finished 53rd of 61 guards in PFF. I'm going to have my own scoring for the stuff later, but just to give you an idea that relative to the rest of the league, in terms of pass blocking, and 46th as a run blocker. So he's about the 15th percentile as a pass blocker and about the 25th percentile as a run blocker. So that's not good. It's not a place you want to say. And his overall, by the way, also at that about the 20th percentile. Most of the guards who are really bad in the league, they're bad in 2 categories. They're not just bad in one. So at least that was both Miami guards suck. For example, they're both worse than Vorhees. So that was there are teams in the league who have it worse than what the Ravens have. Is my point.
Believe it or not.
All right. Well, let's talk about some characteristics and things that he doesn't have that aren't really good. I think he's had a lot of problems picking up stunts and blitzes. A lot of that comes from having trouble matching depth. Some of that is due to length and size suboptimality, which I want to get into later. But as a pass blocker, that's, he loses some one-on-one matchups, don't get me wrong, and he loses plenty of them. But the other teams are trying to do a lot of blitzing and stunting through the Ravens A gaps to try and take advantage of the fact that their guards aren't their guards, and Linderbaum for that matter, have not been able to match depth well.
Yeah, it's I don't know what the issue. It has to be a coaching thing with the stunt issue because it can't be consistently the players that are causing the issue. And I think we got a little insight to that during the Bisciotti and Eric Acosta meeting. He did pinpoint that the offensive line did not improve, and they were banking on these guys improving. So that's that's directed at coaching. So I
Yes.
think this new regime is going to specifically focus on bringing a strong offensive line coach and cleaning up all the BS that we saw in terms of missed pass protection, missed pickup on the stunts, on the blitzes. Um, and it really does start with Voorhees because he's the one that has the tendency to be on the ground most of the time. So I think when he got drafted out of USC, he was a 4-year starter, right?
I think so. I actually couldn't tell you if he started for 3 or 4 of those years. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not like he doesn't have any experience. He's not green. So I think if we get the right coaching in there, Voorhees can clean up on some of this issues that he's having. And then he'll have one more year in the weight room, which it's not like he already had a year straight in the weight room with no issue. But again, another year to get more man strength and have the potential to take that next step that Bisciotti wanted him to.
I mean, he at the combine, he led the entire group with 38 bench reps at
Yeah.
what, 38 bench reps. Despite the fact that he had that ACL injury, which was really remarkable, but it shows you the on-field strength is really limited by his own kind of frame and length.
Yeah.
He has a apple shape, which means he's a more vertical athlete who carries more weight in his gut as opposed to his hips and glutes. And that's where you really want that weight as a guard. You
Yeah,
want it
100%.
lower in your body. So anyway, you'd rather be a pear than an apple, but the length is also an issue. He just gets out lengthed by a lot of interior defenders, which means he finds himself standing up more quickly and
Yeah.
out pad leveled by guys who really know how to stay low on the defensive line and can use their length. Like a guy on the Ravens who would give Voorhees an incredible amount of trouble is Brent Urban. Although not a
Mhm.
great pass rusher, he has that incredible use of leverage and the ability to go long into players. And then you go to a player like Travis Jones,
Oh, no,
who's a
he's no chance
combination of size and length, and he's in a lot of trouble. Yeah.
for sure.
All right. I think if the Ravens do allow Linderbaum to walk, and that's going to be a central focus of what we talk about the rest of the show, is there will be a lot more bombing of the A gaps on both sides. It was done some this year, but if it's a new center, I mean, they're gonna try everything to
Yeah.
probe at the Ravens and see what they can take advantage of.
It'll be interesting how they handle the Linderbaum situation because we do see a lack of size, which is obvious in the middle. So I think if the Ravens do have their eye on someone who can play up to par and also fit that size category they're looking for, they'll probably move on from Linderbaum if he's not willing to take a team friendly deal.
Yeah, and I don't even know what that looks like now in a competitive market. The
Yeah,
opportunity to take a team pet friendly deal. Let's come back to that in a little
sure.
bit. I talked about Voorhees having a good stretch as a puller at midseason, had a number of successful pulls. I was kind of reporting that week by week in the offensive line article that he had, in up into the low 20s in terms of consecutive pulls with either one miss or no misses. And so it was a good streak at midseason. But he did have a very large variation in game to game play overall. He had 3 failing grades: Cleveland, Minnesota, New England. And his high game was an A in the win at Cincinnati. So
Yep.
the 24-0 win there, he had his best game of the season. I'll go into an additional scoring for the year. His raw score for the season was .73, which is right on the D plus level for the entire year. And um, probably would rank as a high D, because there's kind of an aggregation of scoring that occurs when you have a lot of scores at that level. And
Right.
he had 969 snaps to try and prove he was better, and he continually scored at a level that's at that high D level. And I want to get into the components of reduction, which I will for each player. But before I do that, anything else to say about him as a lineman that's a characteristic that you either like or don't like?
Um, I think I think the one thing I do like is that the other linemen do pick him up. They do continue to have faith in him. Even though Emory Jones did step in for a couple snaps for him, they did put him right back in. So it does seem like he does have some confidence within the group. Um, he does have his flashes where he does get to his block and do well. But I think the one thing I don't like is the amount of times he's been on the ground. I think if we can cut that down,
That's a good
really
point.
try and anchor down and not get bull rushed, it can help Lamar out a lot because when he's not getting a free rusher coming at him and doesn't have to evade or roll out of the pocket prematurely, it bodes well for our offense. So I think focusing on staying upright is probably the number one thing for Voorhees.
I want to respond to that just for a minute, because being
Sure.
being on the ground is never good for an offensive lineman. It's never a good look. It can happen naturally, even on a successful block. You hold your
Yeah.
block up, somebody falls into the back of your legs, and you have to go down. And boy, if you don't go down, your season might be over.
The
Um,
Stanley situation.
yeah, yeah. So you want to do whatever comes natural in terms of hitting the ground um,
Best you can. Yeah.
yeah, as softly as you can in terms of that thing. But there's other times there's really bad ones and there's not as bad ones. Tripped entering L2 is
Yeah.
not that bad on my score sheet. Shed, which is you have to watch closely to see if it's tripped entering L2 or shed, because shed is the bad one. That's a lineman. If you get over your feet and the defensive lineman oppositely throws you to the ground, that's about as bad as you can do as an offensive
Yep.
lineman. So it's one of the real central sins. The other way you can end up on the ground is you get pancaked straight up. That
Yeah.
probably is even worse in terms of
A-
it may
And we've
occur in
seen
the
a couple
coverage.
of him get thrown right into Lamar's lap, and we
Yep.
don't need that. Those are the
Yeah.
ones that we need to eliminate for
We
sure.
we don't need that. There's going to be some with any guard, but we
Right.
we we want fewer of that. Would be the way
100%.
I would say it. All right, let's go through the components of reduction here. Missed blocks were okay. So I told you had a 0.73 for the year. My system is a reductions from one basis. So now I'm giving you what the where those points were missed in terms of the various sins of blocking. So he had missed blocks were 1. Those were blocks where he got a 0. He had 0.11 of those. So it's 11/27 of his total deductions came on missed blocks. And that could be a variety of things. Some of them are losses at the line of scrimmage, could be pass or run. Some of them are moving to level 2 and not finding a block. There's multiple ways that it can happen, but this is a substantial portion, about 40% of his reductions were due to missed blocks. Penetrations were nothing. And I look back at this. This was nice. He had one penetration in week 1. He didn't have a single penetration allowed the rest of the year. And that's where he contributed to a loss on a run play. And that's if you're a guard and you do that for that long, for a streak of 16 games, that's outstanding. And he had one against Buffalo, none after that.
That's good.
Pressures were 0.08. That's high for a guard. So let me go over my spreadsheet here real quickly. So Vorhees had for the whole season 21 1/3 pressures, and then he each one of those is a -2, and then he loses the point on the block as well, which it's more than 21 1/3 because since there were partial shares, he lost the point on probably about 28 or 29 total individual blocks on that. But anyway, his pressure number was 0.08 as a total reduction. A really not good number are the number of QHs and sacks he allowed. 8.5 quarterback hits is a lot for a guard, and 3 sacks is probably fairly typical for a guard. Now, if you looked at PFF, you might see a lower number for a lot of guards. The reason is that they don't give out partials, and they tend to round to 0 when they're only giving out 0s or 1s. So I always say I'm using a finer set of tools to give out whatever percentage of a sack or a quarterback hit that these players deserve. I'm interested in looking for Voorhees for how many they had, 8.5 or 3. But any comments you might have about that so far?
No, I think they kind of just tells the story about his season a little bit, especially that pressure rate. Um, so
In this, by the
what?
way, in this particular case, PFF actually had 8 and 3, and I had 8.5 and 3. So there's no appreciable difference in this case.
Okay, what is what's the difference between the pressure and then the penetration
Okay,
difference?
so a penetration is a block that leads to a loss on a run play, or a missed block that leads to a loss on a run play. A
Okay,
pressure is always on a pass play.
gotcha.
And then there's another thing that's built into the adjustment, which is when you got run out of a pressure by Lamar or by any quarterback, that you get a 0R that actually hurts you in the. I take it out of the subjective adjustment as opposed to being a pressure, and a PFF would have it in a pressure number.
Gotcha. So, yeah, I think that definitely tells a story about Voorhees. I think you did good with your regression.
I got a little bit more. The penalties were 0.01. He had a good year in terms of not getting penalized. He was the best of the Ravens interior lineman. He might have been the best lineman overall because I know Stanley didn't have a good year. Rosengarten had a few penalties, but he only had 3 penalties. One of them was a shared false start, another full false start, and then a holding penalty that included 2 stalled drives. So that was a really good element of his game. And overall, that 0.73, like I say, a D or D plus level. Probably if I were to put an aggregate grade on his play, though, it would be a D for the year for Andrew Vorhees.
Fair. Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think it wasn't up to par, or at least to sea level,
Mhm.
to our own eyes. So I think your analysis is definitely spot on.
All right, let's move on and talk about Tyler Linderbaum. He recovered from a poor start to play much better football after the bye. I mean, I really had him as out of Baltimore before the bye, and I'm glad that he played significantly better and is at least the discussion is there. Now it's a matter of price in terms of bringing him back. I don't think there's any question the Ravens would like to have him back. The question is, does it really make sense? He had a .75 raw score prior to the bye. The last 11 games, he was a .81, which is substantially better. It's still not great at center, and I'll get into some of that in terms of his aggregation for the year. But it was a big improvement. And I want to say, what are your thoughts on Linderbaum for the year in terms of things you liked seeing in terms of the mechanics of his play?
Yeah, I think there were games that Linderbaum just showed you why he should be paid as our center, getting to the second level, climbing, making sure his man at the line is secured, and getting to the box to get Henry, spring those big runs. I think he's had an okay year. A lot of the pass protection stuff that we've seen, it does land on him. I think Lamar does have input on sliding the line left or right, but the primary person responsible for that is Linderbaum. So I think he does have a hand in the issues we've had in the pass protection department. Um, and we don't get the push we need up the middle like we want to with Linderbaum. Specifically on the tush push against LA, we couldn't punch it in three straight, right?
I'm trying to remember the game. This against the Rams, you're saying in week
Yeah.
6?
Yeah,
Yeah.
week 6. I'm pretty sure we tried to run the tush push and we couldn't get it in because we just didn't have enough push up front. So I think Linderbaum does hurt us in that department, being able to just bully ball our way through the middle of the line. He has his moments where he does get very physical and get through, but it's just not consistent enough to consider ourselves a power run team.
Yeah, and despite the amount of size they have invested with Faalele at guard, I think that's probably true. Um, aside from Faalele, the more I think about it, it's really not that big an offensive line.
Yeah.
Rosengarten certainly is a little bit on the smaller side for a right tackle. Stanley is the normal size for a um, for a left tackle,
Yep.
and Voorhees is the normal size. Linderbaum is average only in terms of
Mhm.
size. So you end up with a set of players that's small with the exception of Faalele. And the Ravens, as much as they had Ben Cleveland on the bench, they could have gotten bigger. They had Corey Bullock around, who I think would make the Ravens probably a little bigger at the center position if he
Right.
takes over this next year, particularly if he continues to build on his body the way that a Linderbaum has to pick up a few extra pounds and play with them effectively. But it's really not a huge line.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that the Ravens fans were calling for. We're just not as big as we would like to be. Relative, if you want to compare it to 2019, our offensive line was the best in the league, and we had Orlando Brown on the right side and a healthy Ronnie Stanley on the left side. So, and then you had Skura and Yonda and Bozeman at the left guard position. So I think I don't know why the Ravens don't try to push towards that 2019 line as much as they can, because that line was elite. Obviously, you have a all-world Hall of Fame right guard, but
Yeah, that's part of the problem is you can't be that line
yeah,
unless you have that guy. And they also had Orlando Brown was a guy they pilfered from the rest of the NFL in the draft, but getting him with a 3, so the
yeah,
year before.
yeah. So it's been tough since then. I think the Ravens are focused on trying to get back to that, and I think that was evident in the Costa and Bisciotti meeting.
Yeah, you made a good point about that you rarely will hear somebody in management and even Steve Bisciotti say so clearly that, Warhop is not gonna be back, an offensive line coach. Because one thing about Bisciotti is he doesn't reach down into the individual silos that report to him. So he has a head coach that reports to him. He has a general manager reports to him. He has Sashi Brown, who's the president, reports to him. I think technically the communications department also reports to him and not Sashi. I'm not 100% sure that that's true anymore. I think it was true when Kevin Byrne was the guy. I think it's true
Yeah.
with Chad Steele as well. But in any case, he has these silos each act independently, and he would be. It's not his management style to reach down into that silo and say, I want you to get rid of this guy and this guy and this guy, or I don't want this player back, or anything like that, just as he's observing as a fan. Whereas Jerry Jones not only does that, he makes himself the general manager
Yeah.
in the
Terrible.
thing, which is a 10-year-old, you said, or terrible. Either one
Terrible.
would be correct. Yeah.
Terrible. Yeah. Jerry Jones is very interesting. That his documentary that he put out this summer, that was very interesting to say the least. I think it gives you a good insight onto really who he is and
I
how
didn't
he
see
handled
that,
it.
but I'll have to watch it. He's been on Landman. I don't know if you're watching that show, but it's a
I
really good
haven't
show with Billy Bob Thornton. I'd highly recommend it to people. But he was on it like on the deathbed of another oil company owner,
oh
and
man.
you could just see him pontificating in a way that would have to cause eye rolling within the Dallas war room on draft night.
I
It's
can
just like
imagine.
you have to hold back on it. It's part of
Yeah.
the structure that you have to live with if you're in that room, but
Yeah.
you can't appreciate it at all.
Yeah. It's the even the way like I said, if you watch the Netflix series, The Gambler and His Cowboy is the name.
Okay.
It's very, very good series. It shows you what he did to Tech Strand and everything going into that Cowboys acquiring.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about Linderbaum in terms of his grading for the year. He had 3 Fs the game and 5 grades of A minus or higher, all of which came after the bye. That's a lot of variation. It's probably more common that happens at the center position because the grade ranges are tighter. It's harder to get an A at center, and all the grade ranges are tighter because centers know where they have to go right after the play. They're kind of in charge of their own block, and so they don't miss nearly as often, which is something that comes up. He had a pass blocking year that improved in the second half, but this is the central problem with Linderbaum is he still finished 18th of 32 centers as a pass blocker in PFF. And this is a guy who you're going to give a contract that is maybe a record contract ever doled out to a center,
Yeah.
but it probably shouldn't be.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough to see what they do because he doesn't play to the top of the market center that he's gonna probably be requesting for. Um, I just think the one thing that the Ravens probably will lean on is his leadership that he has in that room. He's built a very good rapport with the guys in that room, especially Ronnie Stanley. He's been the longest tenure, and he's probably mentored Voorhees and Rosengarten and been able to help them with their game and show them how to be pros. Um, it's really interesting. And then also he has a relationship with Lamar Jackson, and they have their own little
Yeah.
handshake. And it's then you got to also think about how Lamar feels about this. Does he want to build a new relationship with a new center? And there's a lot of different aspects to this. But if we're going to evaluate Linderbaum on the field specifically for his play, um, we can easily say he does not. I'm not gonna say deserve, but he doesn't bode top of the line money at the center position.
Well, I'm with you on that, and we got to look fairly at him as a run blocker, where he's about the 4th best in the entire league if you look at PFF. But it's the less important characteristic.
Right.
You have to be a good pass blocker first in the NFL, and it does not matter what position you're playing; it's still more important. And if you look at the PFF things and you actually figure out where does the total score fit between the run blocking score and the pass blocking score, you'll see it's a ridiculously overweighted to the run blocking side. I've heard different numbers of 70% and 85% run blocking that is a relative weighting between those two things. So, needless to say, I don't agree with that methodology. Linderbaum's also had more of a problem being penalized
Yeah.
that shows up a little bit. He will play in his 3rd straight Pro Bowl. That's actually hurt the Ravens in some way. It made him, completely out of the picture in terms of any possibility that they would be able to franchise tag him a year ago. That reduced market frictions. Part of the issue now is that Linderbaum doesn't have any reason to agree to a team-friendly deal without hitting the market first.
Yeah.
Now, why is that? Because he has no more risk in terms of play. So every week that passed during the 2025 season, the Ravens lost some of the ability to make a deal that might have been, a divisible benefit arrangement where Linderbaum would take risk off the table and the Ravens would pay him for some of that, but not all of it.
Mm.
And it's a shame we've gotten to this point, and now I think it's very unlikely he gets signed before heading to free agency. The Ravens will probably give him a support level deal that they're willing to pay, maybe $15 million a year, let's say.
Yeah, just to give him a little
And
benchmark of
it,
probably what he's going to be looking for. Yeah.
yeah, and they do that for almost every player is
Yeah.
they or any player they want to retain. And then they let them go to the market with that, and then if he comes back and says, I can't do any better than 18, or I've got an offer from the Giants, say for 18.5 million,
Yeah.
do you want to go higher? Then
No.
the Ravens can decide at that point whether or not it's the right move, and they are not in a good position in terms of having the other interior linemen that they need to put together their 2026 line. We're going to talk about that more in the later elements of this. All right, I'm going to talk about raw score for the season. It was at .79, exactly at the mid-level of the C range for a center, by the way. He was at a C+ range before he failed the last game against Pittsburgh, had a poor game. So anyway, it right at the mid-level. There's nothing bad about that, by the way. That means you're a league average lineman, and that's what I think that Linderbaum basically is at that center spot. Because I think obviously the pass blocking is much more important. The penalties are also a little underrated. So between, given that, I'm just fairly opposed to playing him top of the market money. But I think the Ravens combination of need and
Familiarity with Linderbaum.
yes, leadership, need and
Yeah.
leadership. Those are the two I'd go with. I would be okay paying him between 17 and 18 million now. And 18 million is the Creed Humphrey waterline. I mean, Creed Humphrey is
I know.
orders of magnitude the better player than Tyler Linderbaum.
Size, play, everything you can imagine.
Yeah.
He's topped them, so it's tough.
Yeah. I first saw Creed Humphrey play when he was a true freshman at Oklahoma, and we were evaluating Ben Powers coming into the league at that point as a Ravens draft pick. And you could see right away, Creed Humphrey, he had some footwork things that were going on at that time, but he was going to be the best of that group.
Yeah, and he's a lefty center too, which is not common.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
He snaps the ball left-handed. Okay, did not know that.
Creed Humphrey is left-handed. Yep.
All right. So let's go through the .79. I want to break it down for you a little bit the way I've done with the other linemen. The components of reduction. So missed blocks were .09 of that. There's 21 points in total. Penetrations were 0. It's rounded from .0045. So it just missed being a .01 there.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. The new year doesn't have to mean a whole new you. Sometimes it's just about feeling a little less burdened. And one thing, for instance, I'm working on is letting go of that constant pressure to have everything figured out. Like I need to be perfect or I am behind if I'm not. Therapy can help you identify what's weighing you down or holding you back by giving you an unbiased perspective so you can better understand your relationships, your motivations, and your emotions. And BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with a qualified therapist. Their therapists are fully licensed in the U.S. and work according to a strict code of conduct. They also do initial matching work for you so you can focus on your goals. You'll fill out a short questionnaire. With their experience and strong matching process, they typically get it right the first time. And if you're not happy with your match, you can switch to a different therapist at any time from tailored recommendations. BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with qualified therapists. Sign up and get 10% at betterhelp.com. That's betterhelp.com. Let me tell you about the online cannabis company that's changing the game, Mood.com. They created an entirely line of functional gummies, 100% federally legal THC blends, discreetly delivered right to your doorstep. And here's the best part. You can get 20% off your first order at Mood.com with the promo code RAVENS. Now, I've tried a bunch of their gummies myself. Each one's totally unique. The Sleepy Time gummies knock me out right away. They help me unwind fast, leave me refreshed the next morning. The Epic Euphoria gummies, they're perfect for when your day just isn't going the way you want it to go. What makes Mood special is how they pair the THC with natural herbs and adaptogens. You won't find blends like this at any local shop. They've got gummies designed for focus, relaxation, clarity, even energy, all made from cannabis grown on small, family-owned American farms. No pesticides, no shortcuts, just high-quality weed you can trust. Plus, Mood backs everything with a 100-day satisfaction guarantee. So head on over to mood.com, check out their amazing selection, and don't forget to use the promo code RAVENS at checkout to save 20% off your first order.
Every day, companies you've never heard of are making millions off your personal data. Your name, address, phone number, even details about your family are pulled from public records on the internet, then sold without your consent. There's an entire marketplace built on your privacy, and most people have no idea it exists. Aura fights back. Aura removes your personal data from broker sites and keeps it off. Aura also alerts you fast if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura is more than just a data broker removal system. It's a full digital security suite that protects every part of your online life. Aura gives you a VPN to stay private, antivirus to block threats, a password manager for safer logins, and spam call protection to shut down scammers. Aura scans the dark web for your most sensitive information and notifies you instantly if anything is exposed. And if your identity is ever stolen, you're backed by up to $5 billion in insurance and 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other service charges about the same, but only cover one or two areas. Aura gives you everything: data broker removal, identity and credit monitoring, device protection, and fraud support, all in one simple app. Aura removes what's already exposed, protects what's not, and puts you back in control. Go to aura.com/remove for complete digital protection and peace of mind. That's aura.com/remove. Penetrations are never a whole lot, but this is a good season. Only 1.5 penetrations allowed. Pressures were 0.07. That's quite high for a center, as you would expect. And quarterback hits and sacks were 0.03. Penalties were 0.02. Had 5 flags and 3 stalled drives on the season, which is not good. Linderbaum has, most notably in that Week 18 game, he had a huge holding penalty that not only negated a 20-yard run on 3rd and 9 by Jackson, but also stalled that drive subsequently when they didn't convert the 3rd, and I think it was 17 because it was 2 yards downfield kind of thing.
Yeah.
But not good, and I think you have to put an awful lot of value on the off ledger items to get to 18, 19, or 20 million for Linderbaum.
It has to be those qualities you can't put on the field. I mean, it has to be. Honestly, it comes down to how Lamar Jackson feels as well. I think if he gets to, I mean, I would not be surprised if Lamar Jackson's banging on the door for Linderbaum, but I think Lamar Jackson's also realistic and has enough foresight to understand, okay, maybe I could work with another center, maybe a little bigger, maybe someone that can get to the space that we need, sure up the A gaps. He probably does have that foresight. So I'm not going to say Lamar is, oh, I want my player. I want my player. I think he's going to be logical about the situation and think, okay, if they do ask me, I'm probably going to recommend. But if they have another candidate in mind, I'll probably give my insight. Okay, I wouldn't be opposed to that. So I'm interested to see how they're going to attack the center situation. If Linderbaum does go, are they going to fall back on Bullock and be like, okay, this is it? Are they going to continue to try and work through the draft, or are they going to eye someone in a free agency, which would be redundant because they're letting their own free agent go? But
well, they might be trying to get 80% of the player at 20% of the price. So it could be they like a center that they can have for $5 million a year for 3 years, let's say, who's unproven at this point, but they might like more. And they might even be bringing in a guy like that to be a backup interior offensive lineman, but he ends up winning the starting job from Corey Bullock.
Fair.
And
Fair.
So
I mean, it's interesting how we can approach this. I think we could see a lot of UDFAs thrown in there for the center.
Yep, pretty good bet. Good bet indeed. I mean, they've got a fair number of picks, so they'll get the guys they want and not want to compete on UDFAs. But the loss, we'll get into this later. Let's move on to Daniel Faalele before we get into a lot of the strategy elements for 2026. I think there's no way in which the season for Faalele was not a disappointment. I'm particularly disappointed personally because I thought he played well in the last 5 games. I thought that might continue into 2025, but he really never took his game forward from where it was in 24. Didn't think he had a terrible year overall, including the last 5 games, which are very good from 24. But then it's just, where is that guy? What are we missing this year that Faalele regresses from those last 5 games so badly?
Yeah, again, I'm not gonna beat the horse with a dead. I mean, I'm not gonna beat this thing with a dead horse. I think coaching, A, was definitely probably the problem, and then
Mhm.
B, he did. I mean, he had videos of going to offensive linemen's camp school, like we've been talking about for years, and none of that seemed to show up on the field. Um, I don't know what it could have been. I think the one thing that did rub me wrong about Falele throughout the whole season was after the Pittsburgh game when he just stormed out of the locker room without talking to reporters because they have a no if you don't have a shirt on, reporters can't speak to you. And he intentionally didn't wear a shirt, smiled at the reporters, and walked right out to try and beat that
Hadn't
rule.
heard that story. Had not heard that
Yeah,
story.
that
So
happened. Go
he
ahead.
does not like to talk to the media, I'm told. And going into this season in camp, I specifically asked the Ravens if I could have an interview with Daniel Faalele, and I had an idea for a project, which would be just to follow him around for an entire day of training camp and talk about every single rep he took as he went through that day.
Yeah.
And they weren't crazy about the amount of detail that was going to be provided on that, but they also said that Daniel Faalele doesn't want to be interviewed. And
Mhm.
so, he seeks to avoid that spotlight and whatnot. And so even for someone as positive as I was about Daniel Faalele coming into this year, I don't think he would have been particularly happy to be outgoing. The Ravens have guys on the team who are perfectly happy to talk
Yeah.
at length.
100%.
Kyle Van Noy is, like a guy who does stand-up comedy. I mean, he's perfectly happy to talk about his situation. But anyway, Daniel Faalele is not, and he's a guy who, unfortunately, didn't have a great season for multiple reasons, but is also hyperbolically criticized by the Ravens fans who really don't understand offensive line play.
Yeah.
So we have both could be true, by the way, because he was in about the 25th percentile of guards in the league in what he did. I would say that's above the replacement level, by the way. Even at the end of the year, where he had dropped to 25th, he was probably 45th earlier in the season, midway point or so.
Right.
But he dropped to 25th at the end of the year, and I think that's a reasonable. His play definitely dropped off, with some poor late year play. But I'm really bothered by the amount that Ravens fans just want to memify him every single time that he does what is his most frustrating thing, to be a slow processor and a lack of decision making to try and look to the right block. I mean, it almost looks like some ways he's drunk on the field. The guy kind of reminds me of the meme. He kind of reminds me of, and I hate to bring this up because it's just going to be one more thing. Is John Travolta from the movie Pulp Fiction, when he comes into the drug lord's house and the woman talks to him from upstairs, and he's like
looking
kind of
around.
looking around slowly at various things. It's like that's the
Yeah.
meme that they would. But that's very frustrating about him. But it also is not the most important blocks in terms of the outcomes involved, and
Right.
that's where people just don't freaking get it.
Yeah. Like there was an instant on the deep touchdown to Zay Flowers against the Bengals. I mean, he let his guy go right through, but Lamar makes the play. I mean, stuff like that does happen. I mean, it's unfortunate. He is essentially the scapegoat of the. You need a scapegoat for a group, and he's the
Yeah.
scapegoat, I would say.
He
So
and Harbaugh are the biggest scapegoats this year, no doubt
yeah,
about it, for the Ravens. Um, he had a very slight improvement in play from first half to second half of 0.74 to 0.75, but I would caution you to look at that and say a lot of that was due to the fact that the Ravens played some worse teams in the second half. The first 6
yeah.
games pre-bye were very tough opponents, and the remainder were not as tough. And the slight improvement I would actually couch as probably a slight reduction in the quality of play given the level of opponents.
especially because we went against what was it? Miami, Green Bay. There was one more team in between there that just was atrocious on the defensive line, and we kind of had our way running the ball.
Oh, okay. You're saying for that game they were banged
Yeah,
up or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, it could have been the Jets or somebody like that. But obviously they played a lot of teams that weren't that good in the second
Right.
half. He's inconsistent as a puller, but this is something. He had his stretches of good pulls as well. And he showed signs in the second half. This is one of the things that got better about his game, while some other things were getting worse, is that he actually was able to move to level 2 and connect on some blocks. And it wasn't consistent enough to be happy about, but there was notable improvement for a 2 or 3 game period in there that said, wait a minute, is this suddenly becoming better? And then no, it wasn't. So that was unfortunate. You know, I think he's a guy that the best situation for him is when he has a clear man assignment across the line of scrimmage from him. And that's exactly, unfortunately, what other teams try and avoid. So they want to throw all sorts of confusing elements at him, stunts and twists, and leaving the guard bubble there. So his assignment is not, understood. And then he has to kind of figure it out, what he has to do. And as soon as he has to figure things out on the field, it hasn't gone well for him. So, I'm certainly bothered by that. I don't like the way that went. On the other hand, the fact that other teams are trying to avoid him so directly in terms of a one-on-one matchup should tell you a lot of what you need to know about how effective he is in those individual one-on-one matchups.
Yeah, I think it's different. It's really hard because we do want to run multiple variations of scheme, and like you said, he excels at man blocking because there's not really a lot of thought
Mhm.
process in man blocking. So, and the only time he does get beaten man is if the defensive lineman's able to shed his big arms and just get right through because he's unable to refit inside the pads of the breastplate of the defensive lineman. So it's tough for Dan to try to show off his skills because he's limited in his arsenal that he has. He can get to the second level, but he has a tendency to target where the guy's already at rather than targeting where he potentially could be after the play. And that's what's causing us in some of these situations where Derrick Henry's getting blown up in the backfield because he's climbing to that second level, going to where the linebacker was, but the linebacker is already moving and he's filling that void that Faalele left. And now we see Derrick Henry struggling to get back to the line. So it's multiple different things that accumulate to Daniel Faalele not looking good. But like you mentioned, he does excel at man blocking. It's just tough to accommodate one offensive lineman to your run game. So it's
Okay, accommodation is really what you need to do because I mean, there is a lot of value. He's one of the few offensive linemen in the game who can, and doesn't always do it, use his side really effectively to get legitimate push off the line of scrimmage. And in particular, when you're starting with a duo block and
yeah.
so I think of it as a combination block. Maybe the Linderbaum is the climber and he's the guy who does it. He's a rare guy that can get a lot of push off of those blocks, even on a big defensive lineman. I have never liked the way Daniel Faalele finishes blocks. I've never
Yeah.
felt like he's physical enough, that he falls on guys enough. And he's a 360 or 70-pound man.
It's like he's
Throw
scared
that
to
weight
fall on
around.
them.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
he's scared. Yes, I agree. I think there is kind of a gentle giant kind of a thing about him that he doesn't want to. It might be that he might not really want to get in a tit for tat arrangement where he thinks he's being targeted by other players the same way.
that
With,
is
falling
that
on
kind
top.
of mindset is damning to
It's
me.
not good for offensive line. No, you can't do
Yeah,
it.
you play football. This is football at the end of the day. I would expect that from a receiver or something, but you're an
Yeah.
O lineman. Your whole job is contact. I
Yeah.
don't get it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I agree. I think it's a negative factor. Anyway, aggregate score of a 0.75 was on the C minus D plus border. Probably would be right there for the whole year, as opposed to Voorhees falling into the D range. He was a C minus D plus. Components of reduction I want to go through. Missed blocks were 0.13. That's extremely high for a
Wow.
guard. I've never seen one that high that I can recall. And if you just look down his whole season, he's got. Let me go to that real quickly. Faalele
0.13.
had 119 missed blocks in 17 games, which is an average of 7 per game. That is a very
That's
high total for a
terrible.
guard. It's a very high total
Wow.
for a guard. And that doesn't even get into any of the other penetrations, pressures, quarterback hits, sacks,
Right. That shows
penalties.
missed blocks.
That's just missed blocks where you got a 0 on the play.
Wow.
So that was very high for a guard. The penetrations are 0.01. It was 0.007. In this case, it was rounded up.
I don't know how many
Two-
missed blocks you have for L2 blocks. I don't know if you have that.
Yeah, I don't have it separated, but you're
Okay.
absolutely right that L2NB was probably the most, at least a plurality of his blocks there. So it was the highest percentage of his missed blocks would have been L2NBs. But
Gotcha.
he had some at the line of scrimmage too. I mean, decisiveness was a problem, but I'd say the L2NB and getting to level 2 and just not really processing quickly enough who was his best target is the most like prototypical, archetypical, I'm not sure which is the correct word in this case, Daniel Faalele miss.
Yeah. Gotcha.
All right. Penetrations were 0.01. Pressures were 0.05, that's better than Vorhees. His quarterback hits and sacks were 0.05. Now, for example, Linderbaum was at 0.03 and Vorhees was at 0.07 in those categories. So not terrible in that thing. Both his pass blocking numbers actually okay. Penalties were 0.02. He did not have a big year where he got penalized a ton. He got 5 flags, including 2 stalled drives. Definitely wasn't as bad as Tyler in that category. And so at 0.02, Tyler was a 0.02 also, had 3 stalled drives. But anyway, that was not a serious problem for Faalele on the season. We've seen John Simpson play here a couple of years ago. Linderbaum last year, who've had much bigger interior offensive line penalty problems.
Yeah, and I think that's surprisingly not really Faalele's problem. Only time he probably does get penalized is when he gets beat and he has to grab a little bit, but he never really puts in himself to get penalized. False starts here and there, but I think in that category, Faalele has done himself well in terms of his mental game. But yeah, it's just the other part that we have issue with.
Yeah, that is one of the well-coached aspects of the Ravens, that they reduced their false starts overall on the offensive line this year.
And they got a lot of false or offsides due to the snap count this year as well.
Yeah, they got some, but they went from 24 to 19 false starts, I think it was. And the other thing that does is that takes the pass rushers out of those sprinters blocks at the end of the line of scrimmage when they can use multiple cadences. So I think they really got value out of all the time they spent on that. But it was a lot of time that they spent trying to get that right.
Yeah, they spent the whole camp doing it, and it's not like it mattered in the end in terms of like getting to the playoffs and doing something. So it's unfortunate, but
it wasn't the deciding factor. And in fact, it ended up really the single deciding factor for the Ravens was Lamar's health this year. And I know people hate it when Lamar gets blamed for this. I'm not blaming Lamar for it.
It's just
not
point blank. It's fact.
It is what it is. Yes.
You need your quarterback to win Super Bowl. You can't win a Super Bowl without your quarterback. And if he's hurt, you're not going to win.
On this team in particular, all the Ravens' misdirection, which is the whole fuel for the offense, was, most of it was lost with Lamar not being able to move around like he normally could.
Yeah.
You could just, it's very evident in terms of the player he was when he was healthy for those first 3.5 weeks, and then the last game of the season. Game. Yeah.
Wow. And I think I will say this. I wish the Ravens did start Huntley as soon as they could. Maybe just gave Rush the one game, but I wish they didn't double down the next game and start Cooper Rush. I wish they would have gave Huntley the nod after that first bad
so that would have given him a chance to beat the Rams in that game where the Rams made a lot of mistakes to keep it only 17-3. It's possible that would have worked. It's possible. And that would have still been not enough to put him in the playoffs. The game that the Ravens needed was the first Steelers game. That was the game they needed to win. Yeah. And there were officiating questions about that if they'd gotten those, they would have had it. Or they could have just made the field goal or managed the clock at the end of the game without Flowers kneel in the Pittsburgh game, in the game at Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Or the big deep touchdown. Yeah, it's a lot of different things, but it's neither here or there. We're starting fresh of new regime.
we'll talk about Emory Jones here briefly, and we got to kind of wrap this up because and there's not a lot to say anyway. But Emory Jones, a 3rd-round pick, didn't return from NFI until about midseason when he got. I'll tell you when he got his first playing time, because that's really the significant question here. But he didn't.
Right?
That sounds right. Did he get one snap before then or something?
Might have been. I'm not sure.
No, you're right. The first Bengals game, the Thanksgiving game, was in week 13 was the first time he played.
Yep.
So right there, that should tell you that, they talked about him. He was back, and then he wasn't doing pass blocking, and then they add him to the roster anyway. They had him as inactive. And all of that tells me, and the fact that he only ended up playing 42 scored snaps on the season, tells me he probably should have been NFI the whole year. The Ravens would have been much better off. Now, obviously, the Ravens and Jones either couldn't come to an agreement on that, or the Ravens didn't think it was the right thing to do. One or the other. But
I mean, now we're back in a David Ojabo situation.
Yes, exactly.
If Emory Jones can't perform to drafted expectation, now we're in another situation where we're looking for a new guard, and we have one less year of control for Emory Jones because we wasted it on 42 snaps for the year. So
exactly.
Another gymnastics things we have to do with the draft and just the team control. So I think it'll all be good if some of the flashes that we saw Emory Jones have this year comes to fruition in a full year's time. I think the things I do like about Emory's game this year was actively looking for work in the pass game, continuously head on the swivel, looking for someone. When he's engaged, he's engaged. I don't have any recollection of stunts coming his way. I'm not sure if you have any stats on that, but
I don't have it specifically now. But he didn't give up. He didn't give up shares of pressures, quarterback hits, or sacks, except for half a quarterback hit against New England.
And he had that one holding penalty against. Yeah, so there's some things to clean up. I don't know why John Harbaugh put his play down like that in after the first game he had.
He didn't have that good a game in that first game. I'll just let me say this about Emory Jones is that, first of all, his first game was a 53. He scored 8 out of 15 points, including that holding penalty. So it's not like that's knocking anybody out. His score for the season was .63. And remember, we're complaining about Vorhees pretty extensively for, I think, a .73 for the year. So I don't see any evidence that Jones would have been the better player than either Vorhees or Faalele this year. I don't see any evidence of this. Yes. Yeah. Now, if you talk about the future, absolutely. I mean, it's a very reasonable expectation. The funny thing about it is Vorhees has only got 1 year less of runway than Jones does, and he's clearly at a better spot. In terms of, amount of playing time, the amount of feeling forward that he's been able to do.
And I think the issue with Emory Jones this year, obviously, is that he just wasn't acclimated to the speed of the game. There were times, specifically, I remember in the Pittsburgh game, final game of the year, Jones got in for Vorhees, and he's lead blocking for Derrick Henry, and he's kind of just jogging through the hole, and you could see Henry push him forward, tell him to just get the go. And just, I think if he's able to get the speed of the game down and understand exactly what it's meant to be in the NFL, I think he'll be okay. I think there was enough from Emory in terms of competency, the want to try and make an impact as soon as he could. I think if he's able to get a full camp, a full year, we should be able to see why the Ravens drafted Emory Jones.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's entirely fair. I think he still remains an outstanding prospect based on, well, I don't want to say outstanding. He remains a quality mid-round prospect because that's who Emory Jones is. I didn't love him. I certainly didn't like him at all as a tackle, but I didn't love him as even as a guard. But I think he fits the right guard mold pretty specifically. He has very good length and he is, decent size. Funny thing is, he's in the huddle. Maureen and I are scoring the offensive line. Maureen goes, he's tiny.
Yeah, he's pretty small.
After he replaces Daniel Faalele, he really looks small in the huddle.
Yeah, it's pretty. I don't know what it is with these Ravens and these light in the ass. Sorry, these light in the ass offensive linemen. I think we need to go back to the drawing board on what we're looking for.
Yeah. All right. So Jones, I expect to be not the incumbent, but the most likely right guard next year. And that could change if they draft someone and maybe Jones even gets moved to left guard under those circumstances. But I think he makes more sense at right guard. I think the guy they're looking for, particularly if they're looking for to improve the mobility of the line in general, which was a generalized problem this year. Faalele didn't have good mobility. Linderbaum did in the middle, but they may be missing him. And then Vorhees was okay. He certainly got better at midseason in terms of the pulls he was able to do. I think they're going to be trying to improve mobility from Vorhees with a new left guard. And so I think they'll look for that as a characteristic. Is it, well, does this guy really work in his own blocking scheme? And can he do the things we might want to do in both a zone and power capacity? And I think I think they will look for more of that. And I think that will be, if the focus will be on finding a left guard, which is in a lot of ways the more important position. It certainly depend on him more in terms of mobility. The right guard has some very specific responsibilities as well in terms of opening the front gate. But Ravens have a right-handed run game, just like most NFL teams, and they're gonna want to have that.
And then also, we don't know what the new regime is going to want in terms of the quality of their offensive line play. So I think that does play into consideration as well in their partnership with the EDC.
Right. All right. Well, Ben Cleveland had 3 snaps and was released. I do need to talk about him. Corey Bullock had 13 snaps after a very good preseason. I think you mentioned some things about him. I liked him in the preseason too. He did have a big holding call then. But a guy I think has potential to be the next Ravens center. I think that's the reason why they kept him on the roster the whole year, is they want him as the backup center for this year, but they also thought, hey, in 2026, he might end up being the guy. But
or he could be a swing guard.
Could be IOL center. You're saying a guard center?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I don't see him as a guard tackle, even though he played tackle at Maryland.
Yeah.
I don't think he's that guy.
Yeah.
Whereas Jones might be that guy. Jones might be the emergency tackle. He'll still be the 4th guy, I think, because the tackle situation is as settled as it's been in many, many years. To have your 3rd guy be a good developmental player and 2 guys who are unquestioned starters. And then Jones would probably be the guy in an emergency they'd go to if they had 2 injuries. All right, let's talk about the 2026 needs for the interior offensive line, though. Re-signing Linderbaum is right at the top of the list in terms of what they have to decide up front. Do you think any of that has to be a function of whether or not Lamar Jackson, his contract is either renegotiated or restructured ahead of the year?
I don't think that's going to be a factor at all, because Bisciotti did acknowledge that if worse comes to worse and Lamar doesn't want to do anything, we'll just push it into void years, and that'll be that, and it'll be on the same cap that he was last year. So I know we don't want to do that, but
well,
go ahead.
I'll come up with a good reason why we don't want to do that.
Right.
If there was any chance of losing Lamar Jackson after the 2027 season, okay, and that means the restructure is going to be an extension too. So you're going to know you have Lamar Jackson for probably at least the next 5 years.
2030, yeah.
At least through 2030, maybe through 2031, in fact.
Okay.
So if it was a 4-year extension, they would have that. And they're talking about an extension being similar numbers and whatnot. And hopefully Jackson is amenable to that, with just a higher base number being involved.
Yeah.
But I don't want to pay Linderbaum if Jackson's not going to be here. Last thing I want to do is overpay Tyler Linderbaum. I want to overpay Tyler Linderbaum in part because I want to make Lamar Jackson happy.
Yes. And that's what we talked about earlier, is if Lamar's banging on the door for Linderbaum, then the Ravens probably do have to lean that way. But again, Lamar has foresight. I'm pretty sure he knows what Linderbaum's not good at. But that 4 or 5 year relationship that they had built, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's not like it doesn't mean anything, which is evident between the relationship that Bisciotti, Eric, and John Harbaugh had. You build deep relationships on these teams. So wouldn't be surprised if Lamar is banging on the door for Linderbaum to come back and get his bag from Baltimore. But we're just...
Okay, I just lost you there for a second, I think. All right, I'll just continue on here. Emory Jones, you still there, Frazer? Frazer, you still there? All right. Let's just go on for a second here. I'm sure Frazier will be back in a moment, but Emory Jones may be a natural replacement for Faalele at right guard. I think that's the most likely eventuality, is we'll see that happen. Andrew Vorhees enters 2026, and there's a lot of people who are just writing him off, but he very clearly to me is the incumbent at left guard. He has 2 years of runway left. So he's not a weak incumbent when you've still got 2 years of runway left. He played at a level below where you'd hope he would be, which is the unfortunate thing. And he's not going to be beyond having a competitor in camp for his job. He's certainly very much his job is going to be up in the air. But also, I think there's a pretty good chance he ends up playing a fairly significant role for the 2026 Ravens. I don't think he's a guy the Ravens are going to discard. Just checking on Frazier again. All right. Corey Bullock is the likely backup center. Oh, yeah, I can hear you now. Okay, so comments on Voorhees. Did you hear me in terms of what I said? Frazier, you there? All right, this is unfortunate. I'll just go on to Corey Bullock here. The likely backup center, I think next year. I think he could again be the likely backup center, because one of the possibilities is the Ravens draft a center in, say, the second round. I hope they don't in the first round again, but if they draft a second round center that they like, that might be a reasonable avenue. We're having some problem with Frazier's voice, and rather than keep him around here, I'm going to drop him. And Frazier, please rejoin if you can. Okay. All right, great. All right. So please rejoin us, Frazier, if you can. The interior offensive line depth is otherwise minimal, though. You've got Linderbaum, Faalele, Cleveland gone this year, potentially. McCary gone a year ago. This is quite an amount of turnover for a team to take over a 2-year period. And that is yet another reason why they may want to overpay Linderbaum slightly in terms of Frazier, you back in hearing me okay now?
Yeah, hearing you good. Sorry about that, Ken.
Fantastic. Okay, no problem. So we talked about Andrew Vorhees. Still probably playing a fairly significant role on the 2026 team. He'll at least compete for a spot in camp, even if they bring in a new lineman. And it maybe whoever, if they've got a Quentin Nelson with the 14th overall pick, for example, he's obviously going to be taking Andrew Voorhees' job, or expected to take Andrew Voorhees' job. But at the worst, I think Andrew Voorhees will be expected to be the top backup on the interior line for the Ravens.
Yeah, and I think we should, I don't know if you said this, but I think we should bring that John Simpson approach to these guards, especially if we do bring back Faalele. We need to light a fire under their ass. We need to make sure that, look, your job's not secured anymore. Your play last year was not up to par, and you need to prove it going into this year. So competition is healthy. I think if we have the opportunity to get a top flight guard, are you willing to spend first round capital on that?
I'm not crazy about that idea, but it could happen. I mean, they need the team is so in need of multiple positions this year. I mean, they need a pass rusher. They need an interior defensive lineman. Both those would be very well suited to first round picks. One position nobody's talking about is they really need a corner.
Yes,
they've got Wiggins, and they've got pretty much nobody else. I mean, that's a position they need to improve at. You could make a point for them getting a wide receiver in round one. I don't want them to do that, because I want to see Bateman and Walker both,
especially Walker.
Yeah, especially Walker. And
because we're holding him back. I think it's tough the way I hope this new regime takes the training wheels off the wide receivers. I hope that's the case, because it's been tough seeing some talent come into this room and just not being used. Not my thing.
Walker is the primary person who that's been a problem for, but Bateman this year was underutilized. Bateman was
and he was hurt.
And he was hurt, and Lamar was hurt, and so that reduced the extended plays. So it was multiple things going on that they're reduced that. But I would hope both those players are used more. And Walker, I think, is the guy who in an ideal world, he takes DeAndre Hopkins' role, and we don't feel bad about it at all.
I mean, if I'm going to be transparent with you, I think he takes Bateman's role as the number 2 next to Zay, because we do need a big X on the other side, or a big Y or X on the boundary to cause these receivers issue, especially the safety. If because Tess Walker has burners, he's just not a big receiver with nothing to him like a Miles Boykin. He's a quality receiver who can make plays, and he's shown it with some of the plays he's made this year. I would say Bateman's well suited in the slot. He can play on the outside, but he's shifty enough to make these inside corners have to respect his 3-way go because he can make so many moves at the top of the route.
That's the problem for Walker there, is that Walker didn't come into the league with the combination of routes necessary, meaning the comeback, also with the 7-8-9 routes that he runs very well, or to do that. And he's got the highest ADOT pretty much in the entire NFL.
Yeah.
Over 27 yards was his ADOT this year. It's not quite the highest. It might be the 3rd or 4th highest, but and because he's got so few targets, it obviously means less. And you have to include other players who have similar low targets, and that lets a few people in the door. But they didn't use him much on comeback routes, which is why I liked so much the fact that on what was really one of the biggest drives of the season, that the final drive to get into position for Tyler Loop in the game against the Steelers, they had that nice little 8-yard out route that he caught.
And
I think the first play.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. I think they like him on those little speed outs. It might not be speed, 10 to 15-yard outs, because he can sell that vertical and sit on the DB's feet to just get up to the outside. And it's all timing with Lamar at that point. We saw that during the preseason with Rush of the Cowboys game specifically. He had a takeover on that first drive. So I think Tez can get it done. But back to my point, I would love to see him into that number 2 role, and then letting Bateman go in between and letting him be the Z.
Okay. Let's get back to the offensive line here, since we need to finish this up. But
Sorry.
Bullock is the likely backup center, I would say, in 2026. I think they'll either have Linderbaum, or they maybe will have a center they draft. I really don't believe they're going to go into the year with Corey Bullock as the projected center. It's not impossible, but I really don't believe that that'll be the thing. I believe the actual likelihood of that being what they do is low. I think since they have other alternatives, like going to the market for a veteran center, I think that even they would put ahead of giving Bullock the job, even though it might not be the right choice. Veteran center might not be as good as Bullock could be, but I think that's the way that'll end up. Bullock will get a chance at some point due to injury, probably in 2026, and he might play well enough that he Wally Pips whoever the center is, and the Ravens never look back.
Yeah, I was encouraged by what Bullock showed in the preseason. Obviously, didn't get too much in the regular season, but I think the understanding of the game is there for Bullock. I would love to see his size be utilized on the offensive line. Curious to see if we get any push opportunities during the preseason, so we could see what that upfront push really looks like. Obviously, we're not going against starting defensive linemen, but you would still like to gauge how it is if we need to get something going up the middle. So interested about how Bullock will pan out this season. Like you said, I do expect either a rookie, or like you said, if they do bring in a veteran and they expect him to start, then that will be the competition going into the training camp. But I don't expect him to be the lone starter moving forward.
Right. I'm certainly not expecting that. When you get past those guys, and so we're talking, 4 guys, they're really in Jones, Bullock, Vorhees. We did not talk about the potential retention of Faalele. I'm of the assumption right now that Daniel Faalele is probably going to want a new start, and it would not surprise me if that's with the New York Giants. That it goes with Harbaugh and a new offensive line coach. I don't think it's 100% character. He could go to the Chargers too, by the way.
I was thinking that too. Yeah,
but
Seattle if
all possibilities. But the point I'm making is that Joe D, I think, was the big advocate in the organization for Faalele. I don't think Warhop had the same buy-in on him. I mean, I think his guy is Carson Vincent. So we'll
which is unfortunate, because he can't continue to grow to mold him. But Vincent is a hell of a prospect, and
Yeah.
I'm glad he gave us a little parting gift.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a real benefit. But they lost Dellinger, who was their 7th round draft pick.
Yeah,
And boy, would they love to have him as depth entering camp next year.
yeah,
I mean, the guy they do have, Jared Penning, did not impress me in either camp or the preseason last year. And it's unfortunate, but they kept him on the offensive line. They've got a tackle who's more built like a tackle, at least. I don't think he's got a long way to go in terms of development from what I saw. That's Lichtenhan. But the Penning is there's nothing about his play in the preseason or anything I saw in camp that says, yeah, this guy is gonna play for the Baltimore Ravens someday.
yeah. I think the Ravens are definitely going to be going over their evaluation process, like we saw during the State of the Ravens address. I think they're going to be looking into the scouting. They're going to be looking into the free agent evaluation process. They're looking at everything in terms of what has gone wrong in the development process, the development department.
All right, so I'll toss out a plan for 26 in terms of what the Ravens might do, and then toss out any other thoughts you have on the topic. I don't think they're going to really try and make an attempt to get Faalele, so we'll start there because he's a UFA, and they could come up with some scheme to get him back cheap. For one thing, I don't think it'll work. I think there'll be somebody else who'll be willing to pay him more, so I'm not even including that in my possibilities. But I think they probably double dip on the interior on the offensive line on the draft. And it'll probably be an early player, a 2nd or 3rd round pick. And they might double dip like 2 and 4 if they lose Linderbaum.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's certainly a possibility. But I think you have 2 draft picks, you sign a veteran, and you acquire by some means a guard tackle, some guy who can swing. That may be Jones. Jones may be enough for that. And then they really need to consider UDFAs to be ready to fill out a 9 or 10 man offensive line roster as camp ends, because not all these guys are going to stay healthy, and you got to be concerned about that. Not as much as at the cornerback or wide receiver positions. We have all that soft tissue crap going on, but you need to be careful about it.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I might add to that is the only way Linderbaum resigns is if he's willing to do 12 to 15 million annual.
Okay, well, I think it's certainly going to be higher than that because he's going to have other offers, so that's not going to happen. But
if that's the case, then I think that's probably, if he wants to come back on that price, that's the only way he comes back.
Okay, all right. So you're firm on that price. I think the Ravens give him a support offer that's in the $14-15 million range.
Yeah.
He takes that to the market, and he probably ends up getting about 19 or 19.5 million. Yeah,
I was thinking maybe 18. Yeah. We'll see how the market feels about Linderbaum. I think they see the same things that we see, and they're not blind to it. So we'll see.
All right. Frazer, always a pleasure.
That would count as a compensatory pick, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it would be probably a 4th round compensatory if they lose him. He's one of the most highly prized free agents. I don't know who's in the edge rusher group, so it could even end up being a 3, but probably a 4. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Frazer, always a pleasure talking football with you, period. But this is a good topic for us to get together on, something both of us are passionate about. Tell folks where they can talk to you online if they have a question about football.
You guys can reach me on Twitter /X at F_Rave8. That's F_RAVE8.
All right. Other folks out there, please use #FilmStudy mailbag for your questions. I'm trying to make a couple of times a week, at least a 1 to 3 minute video that I'll post on Twitter, Reddit, on YouTube. That'd be more of a mailbag situation. A lot of it, some of it, until at least the draft, is going to be strategic in nature. But I'd love to hear your questions as well, and I'll try and get in that. And your questions will always be put on the appropriate show. So if you'd rather Voss and I talk about it on Friday Morning GM, then stick in an FM GM with it, or tag Voss on the question as well, so I know you want it discussed there as opposed to on one of my videos. Anyway, thanks very much for using that process. Really appreciate you, listeners. Frazer, thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.